much I know the people that are online know me, you know, quite a long time, but if not, just giving a quick background, obviously for myself, prior to getting into the real estate space, everyone founded Opulent Lifestyle, which is a high-end concierge business, basically providing luxury goods and services to professional athletes, entertainers, and those seeking those type of luxury goods and services in pretty much most of, New York City, California, London, Miami, pretty much any major metropolis in the, continental United States, which was good until about the recession, where obviously during the recession, a lot of people look at different alternate revenue streams, and real estate obviously was something that I've always been passionate about. So I got licensed back in New York in about 2010. And again, just like we're going through now, but I think it was a lot worse then during a recession. The real estate market was very pretty much the precipice of why the markets had turned. There was a lot of scrutinized or securitized, excuse me, loans being sold, and those loans being packaged up were a lot of bad mortgages. So when the economy turned, a lot of people couldn't afford their mortgages, and that ultimately caused a meltdown in the markets. And that's literally the time I jumped into it, which was very interesting. So it was harder to really establish relationships in business at that time. But luckily in New York, I was able to offset by doing a lot of rentals. And that's where it kind of took off for me. And then from there, I looked at the investing side. And that's pretty much the space that I felt was the strongest for me, just because of the ease of, being able to access properties at that time when the markets had turned. But at the same time, it was a quick transition. A lot of people focus more on just staying in one lane. I've been able to start as an agent, then move to the investing side, and then ultimately looking to scale up and start doing ground up development. But the first thing I wanted to touch upon, obviously, is the aspect of real estate that a lot of people start with is being a realtor. I personally, am based in Florida, and in Florida, being licensed here is a little bit more difficult than it was in New York. It started off with me having to take a 63-hour course prior to taking the state licensure. In New York, I believe it's 54 hours, somewhere around 50, around 53, 54 hours course before you take the state license. But the difference between the New York and Florida markets is even after you pass the state exam, you still have to take about 45 hours of continuing education credits within 2 years of being licensed. And then even after that, you still have to look at 14 hours every 2 years after your first renewal. So it's a lot more. But then again, the major difference between New York and Florida's real estate market is the fact that during a real estate transaction in New York, you can employ a lawyer. Down here, the real estate agent actually employs or handles most of the duties that a lawyer in another state, such as like Illinois, New Jersey, or New York, a lawyer would handle. But down in Florida, the agent themselves have to deal with it. So the requirements to become licensed in Florida is a lot. But I think it's important. Anybody who gets licensed in a non-lawyer state, be very versed on the different laws that go into real estate. But once jumping into the markets, one of the questions that, I've been asked a lot of times is how much does someone make being a real estate agent? And to be honest, the first year, it's going to be slim pickings. I'm going to be completely honest. The average is about at least somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 in your first year. But as you grow your business, the average real estate agent makes somewhere between 45 and 200K annually. But the main thing about being an agent is you have to have staying power. And I would always suggest someone having a part-time or even not going into real estate full-time until they've built enough business to make it a full-time career. Because unfortunately, 75% of realtors fail within the first year because they don't have enough cash cushion to survive the first, slow couple of months. I know for me personally, I didn't close my first deal. It took about between 6 and 9 months, to be honest, to close the first deal, which is right around average of what it takes. So luckily, I was able to still have passive income from other sources to be able to weather that. But that's the reason why there's such a high turnover rate within the real estate industry is because people don't realize that, it's going to take a while because it's a very referral based business that requires you to have a lot of things in the pipeline prior to closing. And unfortunately, yes, within 5 years, almost 90% of the people in the real estate industry do leave. But at the same time, my focus is definitely to try to promote a lot more people getting into the real estate space, primarily African Americans, just because we only comprise about 6% of all real estate agents in this country. And there's roughly several million real estate agents, in the continental US. So it's a very small number. So I would definitely like to make sure that there are more people who are active, people of color active in the real estate space, just because the opportunities are there. But at the same time, you have to, going into it, I think is where a lot of people fail themselves, in the fact that they're not ready, or at least have a cushion. And a lot of people tend to dive into real estate during downturns in the economy for passive income. And that's probably one of the hardest times to break into the real estate industry. All right, let's turn on for there. Obviously, switching over just a little bit, though, I wanted to look at, where I'm spending a lot more time is discussing just like purchasing a primary residence. People hear, about what the markets are doing right now, whether they are positive, whether it's a good time to buy. It really is more about what you're buying. If you're looking at a primary residence, I would say right now, with the real estate markets being the way they are, with the increase in the Fed rates, anybody purchasing right now probably would like to look at holding that property for some time, and just to see when they can look at possibly refining, because the rates right now are somewhere around 6.61%. So that does impact a lot of people's purchasing power during the climate that we're in right now. But just speaking about that, FICO scores to get loans right now, if you're looking at an FHA loan, FICO score has to be somewhere around a 580. Conventional loans require a little higher, somewhere in the 620 range, to get a decent rate. But one of the things that definitely, I would suggest people doing is making sure, regardless of which way you go, look at trying to get your score somewhere between a 620 and a 640, to just make sure that you get the best rates, because rates are dependent on your credit score. And that's obviously the credit score affects your purchasing power. Next, obviously, doing debt to income. That's another factor that also plays into purchasing a property. And obviously, with an FHA loan, which I suggest most people look at for their first time home purchase, is a 3.5% down. And what they require is somewhere between 43 and 57% of your debt to income ratio. I would definitely keep it as low as possible, because you don't really want to you don't want to find yourself spending more than half of your take home pay purchasing, when it's time to pay your mortgage. I would definitely try to keep most DTI, whether it's FHA or if it's conventional, somewhere closer to less than 40%, just to make sure that you have a lot of cushion for other expenses that would come up. Obviously, everyone who owns a home realizes that there will be repairs at some point. There will be other things to factor in, such as property taxes. If you use FHA, you're going to have to worry about MIP, which is mortgage insurance. You have to also factor in a lot of other taxes that go into owning a home. But I would definitely keep all types of debt to income, which is really taking your gross take home pay and then subtracting what your monthly bills are, and then seeing what's left over. And then that could definitely give you a better understanding of what you're able to purchase. And obviously, what else is required to purchase a primary residence: W-2s for those who have a salary job, and 1099 for contract workers. And they're going to require at least the last 2 years prior to purchase, just to see exactly, they do an aggregate average of the last 2 years W-2s or 1099s. And then they take that and then see exactly where you can factor in your gross, and then determine what exactly your purchasing power is. And obviously, as I've mentioned, interest rates right now are higher than they were this time last year. Interest rates are somewhere around 3.25% to 3.50. Right now, like I said, the average on a 30-year fixed is 6.61 to about 7%, depending on what your locale is and your credit score. But another thing that I've noticed also when I talk to people about looking to purchase properties, one thing that they don't factor in is closing costs. So anyone as a first-time home buyer, factoring closing costs, which is going to incorporate anything from one, property appraisal, lawyer fees, transfer tax. Those are probably the biggest ones. Those alone can run anywhere between 2 and 5% of the sales price. And if you're doing FHA, your closing costs can easily run as much as your down payment. So I always tell people if they're looking to purchase a property, make sure that if you're going to be putting 3.5% down, look to put another 2.5 to 3% down in closing costs, just to make sure that you have some breathing room. And they will probably look at the last 2 months bank statements to make sure that you have at least that in liquid reserves. And then this Sandra, best part of the very brief presentations looking at the investing side, which I focus mainly on, is buying and selling. No, we've definitely discussed the different aspects of a buy and sell, but for those who don't know, buying and selling is one of those opportunities where you look at purchasing a property for a specific amount, whether it be, a fixer-upper, whether it be a new build, but primarily a fixer-upper, where you try to get it under contract at a certain price, factor in what repair costs are, then also look at what you can, the ARV, which is the after repair value of that, and then look at where we are in the markets to be able to sell. For first-time investors, I would say the best tool to probably purchase a property would probably be, you can't really use a 403k loan, which is for a primary residence, but for buying and selling hard money, I would definitely probably stay away from initially, just because it's a tool and a space for more seasoned investors, because you have to pay back the hard money loan within a certain frame, usually 9 to 12 months. So that means you have to be able to purchase a property, be able to renovate it, be able to sell it within a 9 to 12 month time frame. And the reason I say 12 months also is because if you hold the property for longer than 12 months, you're now going into long-term capital gains as opposed to short-term. But at the same time, that's why a lot of hard money lenders try to cap it at about 12 months. So it's definitely a field for those who are more seasoned. So I would say that looking at buying and flipping is definitely an arena that I wouldn't ever suggest a novice person look into, just because of all the factors that go into it, particularly with the increase in build costs or repair costs that are going on right now. A lot of home goods have shot up anywhere between 50 and 60, 75% when you're looking at tiles, when you're looking at hardwood floors, when you're looking at even simple things as faucets and bathroom fixtures. All of those things have gone up exponentially since COVID. So those are things that I would definitely say that, hey, if you're looking to be a first-time investor, buying and flipping probably would be one of the last arenas I would suggest anyone get into, just because of all the intricacies that are in that. I would say, look at partnering up with someone who's seasoned in regards to buying flips and see how they go about it. And then also understand, okay, what your local municipality, how far behind they are in regards to, and I'm sure Keith can attest to this, how long it takes to get certain types of permits. If the city municipality, if the city you're in has a backlog in permitting, that can hold up 2-3 months in regards to getting permits before you can even do certain types of repairs to then sell it. So that's why I believe it's probably one of the most difficult arenas to jump into in buying and selling. Next, obviously, my personal favorite, and where I've made a lot of my bread and butter, is in the buy and hold. My first purchase in 2015-16 was a duplex. I rented it out. I purchased it for 5% down. Lived in one unit, rented the other out, and used the rental income to cover the overhead until 12 months occupancy was satisfied. And then I was able to rent out the whole property and was able to purchase a rental property pretty much for 3.5% down. And that's really why I highlighted the BRRRR strategy, which if you go on larger investment platforms such as Bigger Pockets, they speak about that. BRRRR obviously stands for buy, renovate, rent out, refinance, then repeat, which is pretty much a strategy I use. And I didn't realize I was using that strategy. I heard about BRRRR after I already started. I purchased my first property. I did some renovations to it, rented out the spare apartments, got higher rents, which covered almost my whole mortgage. And I was able to take my salary job, save that money, and then do it again. So to me, I think that's probably the least risky in regards to a first-time investor is looking at buy and hold. As long as the thing I would stress is always looking at a property that the rental income more than covers your debt service. So if I would say, and most large institutional investors probably make sure that your debt service is, they use what's called a DSCR or DISC, which is your debt service coverage ratio. So if your mortgage is, we use a straight number like $1,000 a month, the rental income for the average, upon average or industry average, would want you to have at least $1,250 to $1,300 in rental income, because that would give you a 1.25 or 1.3 coverage ratio. So if your debt service is $1,000, the extra $250 to $300 is the cushion that they think that's probably the safe bet in regards to if you're going to purchase an investment property. I personally, again, when I first started out, didn't even know a lot about debt service coverage. I just looked at how many, I had 2 apartments. I wanted to make sure that each apartment gave me at least net, after I paid my mortgage, $300 a door. So I looked at a property that when I rented it out fully would at least cash flow me $600. Luckily, at that time, with property values being as low as they were in the Newark area, after I paid my mortgage, that first investment property, I was able to clear $1,000 every month clean. And then again, took the cash flow, saved it, and then purchased another duplex right after that. Next is wholesaling, which is something that, Sandra and I, we've spoken about previously. Wholesaling is a little, again, I think it's definitely advanced for someone trying to get into real estate initially, only because wholesaling is basically, okay, you get a property under contract. You don't intend to hold on to it, for a very long time. So you already have a buyer lined up to purchase it. So even prior to closing, you already have another buyer who you can assign over the contract. And a lot of times, depending on the contract structure, the contract may not even allow you to assign it over to someone else. But I would, it all depends on a seasoned wholesaler, is someone who's able to get a property under contract that has a caveat that says they can assign that contract over to someone else. So if I buy a property for $75,000, you would have to have, or at least the smart play, again, 25%, you would need to have a seller lined up to purchase it for $100,000. So wholesaling, going into the market, you'd have to have a good book of purchasers or buyers of properties that you have. So this way you can unload them prior to having to close on it, because then obviously if you close on the property you purchase, you got to pay closing costs, and now into your profit margins. And then you have to hold it until you find someone who can then buy it from you. And the only problem with that is when they see what is sold for, because obviously they can do a recent search to see recently sold, they'll know how much you paid for it though. So then it'll be harder for that person to offer you a lot more above asking. So if you bought a property, let's say today for 75, and then you try to sell it next month for 100, people are going to know that, you bought it for 75. So getting that extra 25K would probably be a lot more difficult. So I would say wholesaling, again, is one for someone who's seasoned, who's been in the game, who has a big book of buyers looking for opportunities, and then being able to sell it very quickly. And the last, obviously, is where the big boys play, I would say, is syndication, where you partner together with a group of investors to pool resources into a single investment. It's usually one of those where you need to have to, again, it's very capital intensive. because obviously when you start pooling resources together, looking at opportunities where you pool people together, I would say is one that where you want to look at having opportunities that are worth pooling money together, because then you have to start, depending on how many investors you get together, if it's more than a certain number, you have to report it to the SEC. So doing a smaller deal with maybe around 4 or 5 people, then you're able to pool money together. But at the same time, obviously, you have to put together on paper how the deal is going to be structured. How does everyone get paid from it? When does everyone get paid from it? And how soon do you plan to unload the property so that everyone can be made whole? So syndication is definitely the last step. That's usually where you see people pooling large pools of money together to build, whether it's ground up developments or buying apartment complexes and things of that nature. But syndication is definitely like the last step and the most profitable, but also the one that requires a lot more knowledge of the industry, knowledge of contract writing, and depending on how much you're raising and who you're raising that money from, you will have to report that to the SEC, depending on the size of the deal and the people that are in, because obviously they want to make sure that people are not collecting money for real estate transactions that have nothing, that can't afford it. And then they lose their money. And then obviously that's where a lot of litigation goes into play. But again, I'm trying to keep this as short as possible just for any questions, because this is just initial one, because I know a lot of people have been hitting me up just in regards to, getting into real estate, obviously in the new year. A lot of people are looking to that. And if anybody has any questions, I want to make sure that I'm a resource for people to use. And I'll probably do one once a month just for any, when questions may come up. But if anyone has any, please let me know.
I have one.
Sure.
I knew of one person who did this, and I don't know if you recommend, because the next property I'd like to go into is a multifamily, but I'm considering renting out what I have now and living in the next property, maybe one of the units, or just my thought. I've seen people do it like that with duplexes, where they lived in one and had a tenant in the other, and then moved on and wash, rinse, and repeated.
Yes.
So just wondering, what are your thoughts on that? Is that an okay approach as a beginner?
That's honestly, to me, the easiest way to get into the real estate industry. That's obviously how I got in. Like I mentioned, my first purchase was a duplex in Newark. Found one that was actually a foreclosure that came with subsidized tenants in one of the apartments. So I knew going in, I wasn't gonna even have to carry the mortgage because there was already a tenant in there. Did I choose the tenants? Unfortunately, no. And that's another story for another day. But at the same time, at least I know going in that I wouldn't have to carry the mortgage, the whole note, because the rent almost covered the mortgage at the time was about $1,600. The subsidized tenants were paying $1,400. So out of pocket, I was only going to be paying $200 going into the deal. So what I did was obviously I used 3.5% down FHA loan, which is your primary residence loan. So even if I want to, I had to make sure that that was my primary residence for 12 months. And then after 12 months, I could rent, I satisfied the occupancy clause, moved out, moved a tenant in, and then now the property was cash flowing, like $1,100, because both apartments at $1,300. The mortgage was $16, so it netted $1,000 a month. And what I did also at that time when I moved out, I refied and moved to a conventional mortgage, which doesn't have a occupancy clause. I made sure it was. Some conventional loans do have occupancy clause. I made sure mine didn't. So this way, and then I found another property, bought it for 3.5% down, and did it again. Rented out one of the apartments because I only moved in duplexes initially because I wanted to have that extra cash flow to cover the mortgage. And what allowed me to do each time was scale up, because what a lot of people, especially I like to stress when getting into real estate investing, I love multifamilies because the spare apartments income gets applied to your overall gross income. So each property that you get, the spare apartment gets added to your overall income. So you're allowed, each property you get, you're actually able to scale up because you have additional revenue streams for every property you purchase. I think it's probably the best way to go. And obviously, speaking about the burst rate, that's pretty much what it is. And that's how I was able to scale up. And after about my fourth acquisition, that's when I scaled up and started looking at commercial properties.
I actually, like, what you shared is kind of like part of my aspirations as far as taking it in those steps.
Yeah.
Um,
It's probably, and I would say that of all the strategies, it's probably the one the easiest, that has the least barriers to entry. It's just, the only thing is knowing that after 12 months, you have to refi out of the FHA loan because each person's social security number can only have one FHA loan attached to it. So you can have two. So, and if you have a property that you bought for 3.5% down, and then you look to buy an investment property, and the average investment property is going to require you to put 20% down.
20% down.
Yeah. So if you have an FHA loan and you're looking to purchase maybe another, you have enough capital to purchase another property, just know that you're going to have at least 20% down plus an additional 6 months mortgage and interest in reserves.
So I guess I have another question for you. When does, oh, I take it back. Is it when you are trying to obtain a multi-family unit, like, of course, more than a duplex, that they start to look at the cash flow or the potential of the cash flow? Or
You could, with FHA, you can purchase up to a 4 units. So you can live in one and rent out the other 3
okay,
under a conventional 3.5% FHA loan. So if you're able to find a quad, as we call it, or a triplex, you can live in one. And then what they'll do is take the income from the 2 spare or the 3 spare apartments, add it to your income, and you can scale up a lot faster than if you just tried to purchase that same property with just your income. So if you qualified, if you made a certain amount of money, let's say $50,000, $60,000, the amount you'd be able to purchase a lot less than if you tried to buy a single family. But when you look at multifamilies, that's the one of the best things is they count the income, they go by the area market rate rents, and then they add those to your gross income because they know you're going to rent it out, and that allows you to afford a larger property.
got it. That's a good thing.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And also, FHA allows you to use another product which is called a 403k. A 403k loan is an FHA loan, which is 3.5% down, but it's for if you want to buy a property that needs work.
Okay.
It's a property, okay, you find a duplex or a triplex that may need some work. You're able to use, as long as it's your primary residence, a FHA loan, which allows you to put 3.5% down. And then they have someone come in to estimate what the repair costs would be. And then they give you the money for the property and the repair costs.
So they have to send the person to kind of.
Yes. They'll find, they have subcontractors. They'll come out and tell you, okay, to bring this property up to code, this is what it's going to cost. And then they factor that in with the loan. But again, the beauty of that is you only have to put 3.5% down.
Of whatever that total amount is.
Yes.
Wow, that sounds like the way to go. Like I think, after our prior discussion and getting a better understanding of wholesaling, there's a lot to that. There's so many layers to that. And I really think that, especially reading the book that came highly recommended by you, buying and holding, I think is the best way to go.
And I have someone on the call, actually one of my work colleagues from Jersey, Keith is on the line. He definitely does a lot in the wholesaling space, and obviously I can definitely link you guys later on if you want to get a little more information in the wholesale space, because he definitely has a lot. He's done it in the New Jersey area, and I know that he's doing it down the DMV area as well. But that's also someone I can plug you with in regards to the wholesale space, because it's definitely one that has a lot of nuances to it. That as a first-time investor, if you're not as seasoned in it, there are definitely things that you can get tripped up on. So it's if after the call, I can definitely link you with Keith, and he can give you a little additional information in regards to wholesaling.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? You can go again, Sandra. It doesn't matter.
You said I can go again?
Yeah, I know you look like you want to say something.
No, it's like, yeah, and you helped to clarify what I had heard about, the whole multifamily, that the banks do look at, um, the rental income, the potential. And I I think I had a question about the appreciation on properties and how, but we can get to that another time. I think I feel more solid because you kind of laid out how FHA works.
Mhm,
I mean, my condo, it's FHA.
mhm.
Um, and I knew about the whole 12-month policy, like I call my mortgage company, the first question, are you still living in your residence?
We'll
Every
ask that.
year, yeah, they ask that question, every time I call. Um, I think I'm gonna continue reading the book. The
Okay.
book really does talk about, you know, the things you need to do, like analyze and how you I'm getting into the meat and potatoes of it, and I can't put it down. So it's a lot of good info. I think the next time we meet, I'm probably gonna have a gazillion questions for you.
Not a problem. The final thing I would definitely say before, I don't want to talk anybody's ear off. We're definitely about a half hour in. But in regards to the real estate in general, I always like to encourage people, anyone looking to get into real estate, understand that there is no right time. Timing the market, I think, is a problem. A lot of people are like, okay, I want to wait to get into the markets. Oh, rates are this, rates are that. I just purchased a commercial property in December, even though, and in December the rates were higher than they are now. But I factored in a lot of the cash flow of the property to offset the increase in purchase price, not purchase price, excuse me, the carrying cost, excuse me, because obviously with a higher rate, the carrying costs are a little higher. So I had to factor in a property that maybe was a little less than I originally wanted. But then I factored in just what the carrying costs were, and then the cash flow from the rental, and made sure there was enough cushion in there to offset any type of delays in rents, because that'll happen, unfortunately. So you have to make sure you've built in enough a cash cushion to offset that. But at the same time, it's important to always look at real estate no matter what time in the market is. It's just that you may just have to look at what you purchase during makes a lot more sense in how you purchase it, because most of the money you make probably you'll make going into the deal as opposed to when you exit. Because that's one little caveat between commercial and residential. Most commercial purchases or larger multifamilies, those tend to be investors, and investors don't tend to overspend. So you don't see as much appreciation in larger multifamilies than you would in a single family. A single family house will probably appreciate faster than a multifamily, but that's only because some people get they emotionally buy and they'll overspend on it. Like that's been going on for the last 18 months. People like, I need to buy now, and they'll buy a property over asking. Investors are not going to do that. Investors are like, hey, if the numbers don't make sense, they just don't make sense.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that's why appreciation in the larger multifamily space is you don't see as much appreciation.
Mhm.
The numbers have to make sense for the asking price. If it doesn't, most investors won't buy. They don't emotionally buy. So that's the one little caveat. When you start dealing more on the investing side, you don't see as much impulse buying or emotional buying as you would see with people who fall in love in a single family or in a condo.
Yeah, well, coming into my unit, my space, I like it. And it's one that I'm going to want it'll be a part of my portfolio forever, because it's in a county where the properties hold value. The county's known for that, where I'm in Howard County in Maryland. And it's probably one of the most expensive places to live in Maryland. So I know I picked up a gem, and I'd like to, it's not emotional to me. I'm trying to think like a businesswoman. Like people, it's a desired location. Like,
Right.
lots of
Location is key.
what'd you say?
I said location is key.
It is, and I think good might take
That's one of the first rules in investing is location is key, but at the same time, yeah, the better the location, the higher the price.
You're right about that. You
So
are right
your
about that.
profit margins are a little less in a nicer neighborhood. There, believe it or not, and this is something I tell a lot of people, particularly people of color, that there's money in the hood. Okay, yes, you may have to deal with a little more on the tenant headache side, but there's a lot more opportunities in up and coming neighborhoods. I'm a big proponent of investing in areas prior to it becoming popular. Obviously, I was purchasing in Newark in 2015 prior to the word getting out that it was a sexy place to invest, and all the properties that I did purchase in that area appreciated at least 75-80%. This is in the hood of Newark, and I'm repeating it now in the south side of Chicago, just
Wow.
because the profit margins are a lot higher in those areas. But if you want a clean investment that maybe just covers your mortgage, then you probably get those in like the nicer areas. But you always have to factor in that if a tenant stops paying you, you have to have enough capital reserves just to cover that. Okay.